Eggs cost $1.46 in January 2020. By March 2025, that same dozen eggs cost $6.23. In some stores, closer to 9 or 10. That is a 400% increase. And the question every American should be asking is not why did eggs get expensive? The question is, where did all that money go? Because it didn't go to the farmer, it didn't go to fix the supply chain, it didn't go to fight the bird flu. It went directly into the profit accounts of 5 companies. And right now, the Department of Justice is trying to figure out whether those 5 companies made that happen on purpose. This is the story of the American Egg Cartel. And by the time this video is over, you are never going to look at a grocery store receipt the same way again. Let's start with how the egg industry actually works, because most people have no idea. When you buy eggs at a Walmart, a Kroger, or a Costco, you are not buying from a local farmer. You are buying from one of a handful of massive corporate producers who control the overwhelming majority of the national egg supply. Cal-Maine Foods is the largest. Then come Hillendale Farms, Roseacre Farms, Daybreak Foods, and Opal Foods. Together, these 5 companies and their affiliates control more than 90% of the eggs produced in the United States. 90%. From one country, controlled by 5 companies. Now, in any normal competitive market, if one company raises its prices, another company undercuts them to steal their customers. That is how competition is supposed to work. That is what keeps prices honest. But when 5 companies control 90% of a market, and when they all happen to raise prices at exactly the same time by exactly similar amounts, that stops looking like competition. That starts looking like coordination. And here is where it gets interesting. These companies do not set their egg prices in a public marketplace. Eggs are not traded on an open exchange like corn or soybeans, where anyone can see the price in real time. Instead, the entire American egg industry uses a single private pricing company called Urner Barry, now rebranded as Expana, to determine what eggs are worth on any given day. Here is how it works. Urner Barry collects price data from egg producers. Then it publishes a benchmark index. Then, egg producers use that index to justify the prices they charge to grocery stores. Then grocery stores pass those prices to you. Read that again, slowly. The companies that benefit from high egg prices are the same companies providing the data that determines egg prices. They are grading their own homework. They are setting the exam and then taking it. Multiple state attorneys general, members of Congress, and independent investigators have all flagged this exact problem. The New York Attorney General's office said it plainly in a 2020 lawsuit. This system is inherently vulnerable to manipulation. All it takes is for a few dominant players to feed inflated numbers into the system, watch the benchmark rise, and then point to the benchmark and say, "We don't control prices. The market does." Cal-Maine's own CEO has said publicly that the company sets prices based on a, quote, benchmark price for eggs, meaning Urner Barry. In other words, the largest egg company in America claims it has no control over egg prices, while simultaneously being one of the main sources of data that creates those prices. That is a closed loop. That is a system that, by design, cannot be challenged from the outside. Now let's talk about the bird flu. Because this is the alibi. This is what every egg company reaches for every single time someone asks why prices are so high. The highly pathogenic avian influenza, HPAI, has been circulating since 2022. It is real. It has killed or forced the culling of over 160 million commercial poultry birds. We are not disputing that the bird flu exists. What we are disputing is whether the bird flu explains what happened to egg prices. Here are the numbers that the industry does not want you to focus on. During the 2015 bird flu outbreak, economists established a clear baseline. A 1% drop in egg production leads to a 6% increase in egg prices. That is the normal relationship between supply and price in this industry. That ratio held up in 2015. It made economic sense. But between 2022 and 2024, something different happened. During that period, overall egg production was down by 3 to 5% on average. That is not a catastrophic drop. By the 2015 formula, prices should have risen maybe 20 to 30%. Instead, prices rose by 300, 400, 500%. For a 5% supply reduction, prices went up by a factor that was 3 to 5 times larger than any economic model predicted. The numbers do not add up. And the people whose job it is to make the numbers add up, the Department of Justice Antitrust Division, noticed. There is another detail that is almost too convenient to be coincidence. Cal-Maine Foods, the single largest egg producer in the country, the company that controls roughly 20% of the entire national egg supply, reported that at no point did any of its own facilities test positive for bird flu. Not one farm, not one facility. And yet Cal-Maine reported a 718% increase in net profit in a single quarter. A company that was not directly impacted by the virus it kept blaming for high prices, somehow managed to make 7 times more money than it did the year before. Their operating income for all of fiscal year 2023 came in at nearly $1 billion, a 575% increase over the previous year. In a year when American families were rationing eggs, in a year when some grocery stores were putting limits on how many cartons you could buy per visit, Cal-Maine made close to $1 billion in operating income. Here is the moment that should remove all doubt. In March 2025, the Department of Justice announced it had opened a formal antitrust investigation into the egg industry. They sent letters to Cal-Maine, Roseacre Farms, and others, instructing companies to preserve all internal communications about pricing, production decisions, and their interactions with Urner Barry. Within days of that announcement, not weeks, not months, wholesale egg prices dropped 60%. 60%. Almost immediately after the government said, "We are watching you." If bird flu was the real cause of high egg prices, if supply was genuinely constrained, if the economics actually explained the prices, then a Department of Justice letter would not make eggs 60% cheaper overnight. Supply does not fix itself because of a press release. Sick chickens do not suddenly get healthy because antitrust lawyers sent some emails. But prices that were artificially held high? Those can drop the moment the people holding them up let go. And that is exactly what appeared to happen. This is not the first time the egg industry has been caught. In 2023, just 2 years before this current investigation, Cal-Maine and other major egg producers paid out $53 million to settle a federal lawsuit over price fixing. They were found by a jury to have colluded to fix prices and reduce supply. They paid the fine. They did not admit wrongdoing, and then they went right back to selling eggs. The current class action lawsuits, there are now 6 of them, and courts are considering consolidating them, allege that since at least February 2022, these companies used Urner Barry as a shared communications platform to, in the words of the complaint, collusively fix, raise, maintain, and stabilize the supply and price of eggs sold in the United States above competitive levels. The lawsuit also names the United Egg Producers, the industry's main trade group, as an alleged co-conspirator, because the trade group actively encouraged all major producers to use Urner Barry as their shared pricing reference, which is another way of saying, the trade group encouraged every competitor in the market to look at the same private price signal before deciding what to charge. If you think that sounds like the setup for price coordination, so do a lot of lawyers. Now zoom out for a second because the egg story is not really just about eggs. This is about what happens when an industry consolidates to the point where genuine competition becomes structurally impossible. The egg industry has been merging and acquiring for decades. Small independent farms have been driven out or absorbed. The number of companies controlling meaningful market share has shrunk, and as that happened, the mechanisms of price competition weakened. Think about it this way. When you have hundreds of egg producers all competing for grocery store contracts, any one of them can undercut the others to win business. Prices trend toward the actual cost of production. That is how markets are supposed to discipline greed. But when 5 companies control 90% of a market and they all happen to look at the same private pricing index before quoting their prices, the pressure to compete disappears. The incentive shifts. The question is no longer how do I beat my competitor? It becomes how do we all stay high together? Economists have a term for when a market gets so concentrated that companies no longer need explicit agreements to coordinate. They can just watch each other and behave accordingly. It is called oligopolistic interdependence. It is legal, technically. It is also exactly what consumer protection law was designed to prevent before it stopped being enforced. Here is what we know for certain right now. The DOJ investigation is active. The subpoenas have gone out. Cal-Maine has confirmed it is cooperating. Multiple class action lawsuits representing consumers, retailers, and restaurants are moving through federal courts. A 2023 jury already found these companies guilty of price fixing once. A separate probe is examining whether Urner Barry itself was used as a coordination mechanism, and egg prices, while still elevated, dropped sharply the moment federal investigators made their interest known. What we do not yet know is whether criminal charges will follow. Antitrust investigations of this scale can take years. The companies have the resources to fight every stage, and there is no guarantee that cooperation ends in accountability. The $53 million settlement from 2023 was, for an industry making close to $1 billion in a single year, the cost of doing business. There is a bigger issue underneath all of this that does not get talked about enough. Americans are not just paying too much for eggs. They are paying too much for eggs in a system that was specifically designed to be impossible to audit from the outside. There is no public egg exchange. There is no transparent price discovery. There is a private company collecting data from the very producers it serves, publishing an index that those producers then use to set prices, with no requirement for independent verification and no regulator with the authority or budget to monitor it in real time. This is what regulatory capture looks like at the grocery store level. It is not dramatic. It does not look like a crime. It looks like a benchmark. It looks like market forces. It looks like supply and demand. But underneath that language is a structure where the most powerful players in the food chain have engineered a system where they set the rules, collect the data, publish the prices, and then shrug when consumers ask why their breakfast got 4 times more expensive. The chickens did not change. The farms did not change. The feed did not change significantly. What changed is that the companies controlling the food supply figured out that in a consolidated market, with a private pricing mechanism and a convenient public crisis to blame, they could do whatever they wanted. And by the time anyone figured it out, they would have already cashed the checks. So, what does any of this mean for you? The DOJ investigation needs to finish what it started. The class action lawsuits need to reach trial, not just settlement. And the pricing mechanism, Urner Barry, Expana, whatever they call it next, needs to be subjected to the kind of independent oversight that any institution with that much influence over the cost of food should have had decades ago. But the most important thing is simply this. You deserve to know what you are paying for and why. Not because some corporation decided it was a good time to be honest, because the government you fund with your taxes stepped in and forced the question into the open. Eat that with your eggs. If this video told you something you did not know before, share it with someone who buys groceries. Subscribe if you want more investigations like this. We do not have sponsors, we do not have advertisers, and we do not take industry money. The only reason this channel exists is because people like you watch it. Leave a comment telling us which industry you think we should investigate next. We read all of them, and we will see you in the next one.